welcome everyone to this fourth session. I think we are now in week 4 of the Masterclass for the advanced practice. And I'm delighted to introduce you today to Jaquelle Wellington. She's a social worker. She's an alumni. She used to be a student at Brunel, and I'm going to leave her to let you know more about herself, to introduce herself. But I'm delighted, as I was saying, to be able to help Jaquelle in delivering this session on how do we work with affluent families, which is a fascinating topic. So Jaquelle, all to you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that introduction. So today we're going to be talking about recognising and responding to neglect in affluent families, so particularly for social workers. So before that, I will just introduce myself. So I'm Jaquelle Wellington. So I graduated from Brunel in 2016 after completing a Bachelor of Arts in Social Work. I then went to complete my ASYE in a London borough, where I worked in a contextual safeguarding team. So primarily the issues that I was working with was child sexual exploitation and criminal exploitation. So it was all about those children who were at high risk and likely to come into care. So it was quite intense working. I then went back to Brunel. And I studied my master's in psychological and psychiatric anthropology because I noticed that there was a lot of mental health and I wanted to know more about the kind of cultural understanding of that. So I completed my master's in 2019. I then went back to work for a different London local authority where I worked in the assessment team. So I was kind of front door. So it was, child protection strategy meetings, all assessments, also children with disabilities assessments, section 7s, looking at where children should live. So it was quite a wide variety. Then COVID hit, and I found myself working as a designated safeguarding lead for a leading independent school. So currently that school is number 2 for all of independent schools in the UK. So I think I'm well placed to talk about affluent neglect. It's something that I've looked at and worked with for the past 5 years in the school setting. So in terms of affluent neglect, so it is a form of neglect that can be surprisingly really hidden. And that's because it occurs behind stability, privilege, and material comfort. So this session, I'm hoping, will encourage you to look past assumptions about wealth, which seem to always be very positive, and focus instead on the child's lived experience, the emotional world of that child, and their unmet needs. So the definition of neglect, as I'm sure you know, the definition of neglect is the persistent failure to meet a child's basic physical and or psychological needs, and it's likely to result in the serious impairment of a child's health or development. So there are 5 main types of neglect, and these are the ones that's mainly talked about in social work setting. So it's educational, physical, emotional, medical, and adolescent neglect. However, neglect isn't simply the absence of material care. So that's the kind of traditional view of neglect. It's actually about the lack of attuned, consistent parenting that supports emotional, developmental, and physical well-being. So in affluent contexts, emotional, supervisory, and educational neglect are often more prevalent than physical neglect. So when we do think about neglect, often it is that physical, it's lack of resources, it's lack of food and things like that. So this form of neglect can be chronic, it can be very subtle and masked by academic achievement or exceptional behaviour. So I just want you to log in here and vote for which type of neglect you think that children from wealthy families are likely to experience. So I'll give you 1 minute just to do that, just to see what your take is on this. Wonderful. Yeah, exactly. It's emotional neglect. That is the most common type of neglect for wealthy families. So affluent neglect, it refers to neglect occurring within families with high socio-economic status. So this is where material needs are met, but the emotional, supervisory or developmental needs are not. So these children may appear fine and actually may appear like they're excelling because their basic and educational needs are met, but they may experience loneliness, pressure, emotional isolation, or inconsistent caregiving. So highly driven parents may unintentionally deprioritize emotional presence, supervision, or relational safety. So often there's paid carers, children go into boarding schools, lots of extracurricular schedules and multiple house staff. But this can actually create distance rather than connection. So essentially, affluent neglect is not about a lack of resources. So it's not about the traditional type of neglect. It's about unmet needs. So I want to get from you, what words come to mind when thinking about affluent families. So what words spring to mind when thinking about affluence?
Jaquelle, may I suggest that just with the minutes before I didn't have time.
Yeah.
So if you give us a bit like a couple of minutes or 3 minutes, so
Yeah,
people
of
can,
course.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. To have a think about this. It could be positive, it could be negative, it could be neutral. Just, what comes to mind when thinking about affluence. So I'm just thinking here. Yeah, middle class, transfer. So I mean, lots of these words are largely positive. Wealthy, money. When we think of that, we think of access to resources, don't we? Academically high, having high achievement. But then there is that kind of maybe dismissive because of those resources, or, stiff upper lip, all of those things. Yeah. Yeah, private schools. So this is all about the kind of professional bias, what assumptions do we hold? So social workers working with affluent families often face challenges due to our own biases and assumptions. So these biases can actually lead to a tendency to overlook or minimize the signs of neglect, because often it's seen as affluence equates to high achieving. So the presence of material wealth can create a barrier to recognizing neglect, as it may be perceived as a sign of success rather than a need for intervention. So professionals often under-respond to safeguarding concerns in wealthy families. And this isn't, I guess an issue on individual social workers. As we know, children's services is very, very stretched. And so often we have to prioritise. But it's really important for social workers to challenge assumptions that wealth equals safety. So in looking to overcome this professional bias that we all have, because we all have biases, so to overcome this, you should interrupt bias through reflective practice. So it's all about being a reflective practitioner. So utilize supervision once you're in a local authority with your line managers, and lots of local authorities now also have clinical psychologists. So to discuss cases where there is affluent neglect. So it's all about reflecting on that and also holding yourself to account for any biases. And be sure to employ clear evidence gathering and frame concerns around the impact of the child, not the parents' intentions, because it's not the parents' intentions that's coming under dispute. No one's saying that these parents are intentionally emotionally neglecting their children, but through their actions, their children's needs are not being met. So actually applying an adverse childhood experiences lens may actually provide a more effective way to understand neglect and abuse for children and young people who are growing up where they have every material advantage. So it's all about that trauma-informed practice. And this is essential when working in settings where children may not disclose or may minimize problems. And that's because affluent neglect is not very known. And so for lots of these children, this is their norm. And so they're unlikely to disclose and say, this is an issue that's impacting me, because for generations, this is something that is their cultural norm. So adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, are stressful events occurring in childhood. So research actually shows that these 9 events, there are 9 in total, as you can see on the screen, have the most impact when they are experienced directly by the child or if they're present in the household. So it's all about exposure as well as direct impact. So experiencing ACEs, it's not determined by wealth or social standing, and that's why it's very useful to look at affluent neglect through an ACEs lens. These 9 ACEs, they can be found in any type of families, regardless of the income or wealth bracket. So let's look at some examples of ACEs in affluent families. So firstly, emotional disconnect. So these parents, they may work very long hours, they might not even work in the UK, often leaving, so they can leave children in the care of paid carers, which can, but not always, leave children feeling really lonely with their emotional needs unfulfilled by their parents, because essentially their parents are just not there, they are absent. There could be parental separation. So if separated, parents may actually use their children to get to one another. So for example, if a child is attending an independent school, so also known as a private school, they may refuse to continue paying school fees without considering the impact on the children. So there can be a pressure to succeed, so putting high pressure on children to succeed academically, which can sometimes lead to psychological and emotional problems for children. So often, these children, most independent schools do have 11+ to get in. And, if they come from families where there is lots of achievement, their parents might have gone to Cambridge, Oxford, and so forth, that pressure is put onto that child. So evidence actually shows a higher rate of anxiety and other mental health issues in children of affluent parents. And I know through my own practice, obviously working as a safeguarding aide for the past 5 years in an independent school and attending various conferences with other leading independent schools, it's very commonplace for our students to exhibit self-harm, eating disorders, and suicidal ideation. that's unfortunately part of the kind of norm presentation in lots of independent schools. And that's all to do with the lack of control that these children experience, and they look to place that control in whether it's disordered eating or through self-harm. So often alcohol and substance abuse may actually be more present. So often these parents have a more relaxed attitude to parties, sex and socializing. And because these older children, they have lots of resources, so they may be getting a monthly allowance of £500 up to £1,000. This means that they actually have the means to buy drugs and alcohol. And with domestic abuse, so while violence may not be as obvious, there is coercive and financial control, which can be a common feature in these relationships where safeguarding issues have come to light. So in these cases, parents may already be separated or still together, but it's causing emotional harm to the children. So the impact of 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, it creates a lifelong adverse impact on children. So it's not just the here and now, it's actually the after effects. So these children, they're 11 times more likely to use drugs, 18 times more likely to have suicide attempts. That's a huge, huge number there. 4 times as likely to have begun having intercourse before the age of consent, 4.5 times more likely to develop depression, 3 times as likely to smoke as adults, 3 times more likely to develop lung disease, twice as likely to experience liver disease, and lastly, there's a 3 times increase of the risk of health disease, respiratory disease, and type 2 diabetes. So it's not just about the emotional impact, it's actually about the physical impact that is placed on these young people as they grow older. So what do you think, this has come up very small, so I'm going to read it out. So what do you think the challenges social workers face when engaging with affluent families within the child protection context? So I'll give you a few minutes. So I'll give you 3 minutes just to think about what are some of the issues that we would face when we're working with these types of families. I think we've got someone with their hand up. Is that Angel?
Yeah, hi. So basically, few of us are joining from our mobile phones,
Mm-hmm.
so we can't just respond to the QR. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe you could talk through. I'm happy for anyone just to say, you know, if you can't join via the QR code, just to shout
Yeah.
out.
Or can we like put it in the chat as well?
Yeah, pop it in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, these are all really good answers. So that kind of denial. Yeah. Yeah, struggle identifying neglect. You know, we're taught about the traditional definition of neglect, but not necessarily affluent neglect. Yeah, social workers feeling reassured prematurely. That's all to do with professional bias. And also, you know, it is hard, like we said before, to actually identify affluent neglect when these children are presenting as fine and achieving academically and doing well on the surface. Status, yes, definitely. I know my status has definitely been challenged in the past 5 years by various parents who ask to see my qualifications and, you know, what makes me be able to kind of challenge or identify such concerns. Yeah, bias, definitely. You know, I think that, and I think that's a concern as well for children's services on the whole. Like I said before, resources are so stretched that you are having to prioritise. And, you know, I saw, while even working in the local authority, actually how thresholds were changing. because of the number of cases that were, you know, received, and more complex cases. And so, you know, if you have 2 cases come in of neglect, let's say you're on the front door service, and you have one child whose parents aren't able to meet their physical needs, so, you know, there's no food in the home, overcrowded conditions, the child doesn't even have, you know, warm clothing, and then you have another child that comes in, and actually the educational needs are being very met. Lots of independent schools like my one have social workers, they have psychologists, they have school counsellors. You're going to have to prioritise and say, well, actually, which child are we responding to? So yeah. So Professor Bernard actually undertook the first piece of social work research in the UK to explore affluent neglect. Now, this was only in 2017, so not that long ago, which just goes to show that actually there is hardly any research in affluent neglect from a social worker's perspective. And since Professor, because I have met her and she's absolutely amazing, and I would really encourage you to read her papers. But since her research, actually there isn't much out there from a research perspective. There's lots of articles written recently about affluent neglect, but otherwise it's very, very sparse, which is a real shame, because what it means is that actually some parents are going unchecked for the neglect of their children. So what she found was that affluent families often navigate the system very differently due to their status, resources, and social capital, which directly affects the safeguarding practice. So her research was on how social workers engage with neglectful parents from affluent backgrounds, and it highlighted the challenges for social workers. So what she found was that highly resistant parents were more likely to use legal advocates or the complaints procedures to challenge social workers. And I would say, coming from a kind of independent school background, most of independent schools actually have either in-house legal advisors or we outsource, and that is because we have so many challenges over small things like parents just challenging detentions. They will get their lawyers involved. So you can imagine then for social workers, when you're going into a house and saying, actually, you know, we have child protection concerns, these parents, because they have the resources, will up the ante and they will get their legal advocates on the case. So there are challenges of interagency working with private fee paying and boarding schools when child protection concerns are raised. So all schools have to adhere to keeping children safe in education. That is statutory guidance from the Department for Education. However, independent schools, so private fee paying schools, do have a lot of freedom. And so what that means is sometimes they can be quite challenging, and they may prioritise the relationship they have with parents, because essentially the parents are their clients. That's how the schools get their money, over child protection concerns. And they may do this in quite an unconscious way. And that creates a challenge for social workers, because we're used to working with state schools who kind of know the procedures and do not see parents as their clients. So there's difficulty. So social workers found it difficult to maintain focus on the child because of the way that parents use their status and social capital to resist the child protection intervention. And many of these parents displayed a sense of entitlement to do as they please and that they know best. So often these parents are very articulate, you know, they can be, you know, ranging from jobs, whether it's, you know, politicians or barristers, or coming from generational wealth as well. And so there is that sense of entitlement, and the way that they communicate can sometimes be very different to the parents that we're used to working with. And so sometimes there is that sense of belittling social workers and challenging using their own academic background. Social workers found it difficult to maintain a focus on the child because of the way that parents use their status and social capital to resist child protection intervention. So often that is all about, you know, parents challenging you, asking, you know, well, what makes it that you're the expert in this, you know, questioning your credentials, questioning your academic background. And lastly, parents utilise resources to employ private support to opt out of statutory child protection systems, and thus they slipped under the radar of children's services. It's very common practice for parents who do have financial means to not go down the route of, let's say, child and adolescent mental health services. Instead, they will employ private psychologists, whether they're in the UK or sometimes they're based abroad. And so what you might have is children with quite significant mental health challenges, for example. So let's say, you know, self-harming, suicidal ideation, eating disorders. However, they're not actually known by the local authority or by any, even by their GP, because they're sick, because they're being seen privately. And what that means is then, once again, they're slipped under the radar. And I would like to think that all professionals have a duty to safeguard, because we all do. But sometimes, and I've seen it myself, particularly with, you know, in private practice with psychiatrists and so forth, they also see the parent as their client. And so there is sometimes a reluctance to do safeguarding referrals to children's services when there are clear safeguarding concerns. And that can be quite difficult. So when thinking about safeguarding in affluent families, or affluent communities, sorry, it's important to be aware of the danger of prioritising your working relationship with the parents at the expense of highlighting the child's safeguarding issues. So these parents can be quite, you know, charismatic, and you might think to spend a lot of time of trying to get the parents on side. But by doing that, actually, sometimes the child's voice is then lost. So what we need to do is deploy more time and reflection when working with these families. So it's important to constantly reflect and think about, okay, what is this intervention? Why are we doing this intervention? What is the purpose of me meeting with the parents versus the child? So remember to maintain professional curiosity even when families seem high functioning. So it's all about that constant questioning of things. So notice emotional unavailable parents and document patterns of inconsistent caretaking, emotional absence, and unmonitored freedom. Like I said before, these parents will often challenge you. However, if you're evidencing both what you're seeing and the impact, when they do come to challenge you, what you then have is all of this evidence to say, actually, I am concerned because of A, B, C, and the impact. So it's all about that evidence and making sure that also you are confident in that. So utilise your position as the expert in child protection. You are the social worker. So whether they decide to challenge you or not, that is their right to ask questions. You need to stand firm and remember, actually, I've done all of this years of studying, and I know abuse, I know neglect, I know the impact. It's about taking back that power. Often social workers, you know, we look at power imbalance, and we actually look at empowering the clients that we work with. Well, with affluent families, you kind of have to do the opposite. sometimes. You have to take up your power and remember, you are the social worker here. You are the one coming into the family, and actually you have the power in this environment. So it's reframing that power imbalance. So be prepared for these parents to challenge your professional and social status and experience, and recognise legal threats, non-compliance, scrutiny of your practice, escalation to senior management, and complaints as what they are. It's just a smokescreen. It's there to try to make you question your own judgment. If you are evidencing and you are understanding of affluent neglect or harm, then they can complain all they like, they can escalate it all they like. That doesn't change what you've evidenced, that doesn't change what your expertise and opinion is. So recognise emotional neglect for what it is. It's material resources, but a lack of supervision, parties, alcohol, substance use, and access to unlimited social media and gaming. Like I said before, it's all about being assertive and aware of your own unconscious bias in working with affluence. And sometimes that can be really uncomfortable for yourself. I know I've been challenged a lot and had to, you know, be very assertive in that moment, but after think, oh gosh, you know, did I do this? Did I do not that? Because sometimes these parents do employ certain psychological tactics as well to make you question yourself. Once again, use evidence-based practice and have transparent communication. And lastly, do seek support and utilise supervision from your line managers. So when you're in practice, make sure you do take that time to have that one-to-one sessions with your line managers. Often we're very busy, and sometimes, you know, when you are in practice, that's kind of seen on the back burner because sometimes you are just, you know, you're having to do so much. But it's so important to take that time to reflect and sit back and ask for support. So I've got, so we're going to go through 2 cases, and I'm going to give you 20 minutes to do this. So what I will ask is, because I'm going to move on to other slides, can you just take a photo of this slide so that you remember it, or screenshot it, however you want to do, just so that it's not lost. So this is our first case study. So both of my case studies are based on real kind of life scenarios, but obviously they've been slightly altered to ensure confidentiality. So 8-year-old Daniel is an only child of a single mother who is an international litigation solicitor. So Daniel's prep school has completed a referral to Children's Services, and in that referral, it reports that mother rarely attends school events or parents' evenings, and most of her email communication is sent in the early hours of the morning or very late in the evening, so it's not during school hours. There's been several occasions where the school have struggled to make contact with the mother, so in emergencies she's not available. She's recently told the head teacher that she is finding it difficult to manage her son's behaviour at home. So he's reported to swear at her and throw items at her when he is upset. So what mother has asked is for school to actually implement these consequences for poor behaviour at home. So she's asking for sanctions such as detentions or reflective practice in the school environment, rather than doing that at home. So she works abroad for 2 weeks of every month. And during these periods, he is cared for by a nanny who has limited English. And he's actually had 4 nannies in the last year. So there's been a lot of turnover for Daniel in terms of his caregivers. So when the school told mother, you know, we are concerned, and so we are going to have to make a referral to Children's Services, she presented as very angry about this referral and stated, we are not the type of family for social workers. So that's mum's stance. So she's not in agreement with this referral tool. So once again, I'm going to ask you to take a photo of this slide, because in your response, which will be the next slide, I want you to also think about these reflective questions. So what type of neglect is in this case study? You know, what are the immediate and long-term risks that you're seeing? How does affluence or the cultural expectations influence what is happening? What does it mean to listen to the child in this context? What kind of support do you think could bring some change in this family? What biases or assumptions might you hold while working with this particular family? And how can agencies coordinate effectively when looking to work together, particularly as there might be independent institutions involved as well? Now, you don't have to answer all of these questions. They're just some reflective questions to help you in thinking about your response. So here we are. So you're the social worker, you're within the assessment team, so you know you're the first person to receive this referral. This is all the information you have. How would you approach this case? So what's your initial thoughts? What's your initial response to this? So let's have 20 minutes. You know, there are lots of reflective questions there, so I'm sure that will take some time. And then after 20 minutes, let's come back and I'll see what the responses are, and we can talk through. And I can also talk you through, because like I said, it's based on a real life situation, so I can talk through kind of how I approached it too. So yeah, I'll give you 20 minutes for that, and then we can come back.
Jaquelle, do you want people to stay, so everyone to turn the cameras off and then to come back in 20 minutes? Okay.
Yeah, turn the cameras off, then come back in 20 minutes.
Okay. Brilliant.
Should we go ahead now and see if anyone has any kind of thoughts or approaches? If anyone just wants to raise their hand, let's do it verbally.
Yes, good afternoon. Yeah, I kind of did put a response in. I tried to cut it out. I was thinking that I would just review information from the school and also try and contact like health and maybe the police in that area, just to see if there's any other information that's not presented with that referral that you could find out, and well, try not to make an assumption, but also go for a child and family assessment under Section 17, because there's really no clear evidence of abuse or report of abuse. It's just a behavioral issue. And then I also then thought about the behavior and felt that maybe I would try to explore why that behavior is happening. If when it started, is it linked to mothers traveling, or maybe it's linked to the nanny not being able to speak English properly, having limited English. So he could be sort of like frustrated, having not been able to express himself while mom traveled on this occasion. Yeah, so that's all I got.
That sounds brilliant. Yeah.
So I put the initial mindset, avoid assumptions. And then I said clarify the nature of concerns, possible emotional neglect, mother is absent, high turnover in nannies, limited parental availability, limited engagements with schools, attachment and stability concerns, inconsistent care given, nannies with limited English. Then he is displaying anger and dysregulated behaviour at home, but is he displaying it at school? What does that look like at school? And then immediate safeguarding concern, Is he safe with the nanny? Who vets the nannies? What are the arrangements with the mum abroad? Does Daniel have any other consistent adult attachment figure except for the nannies? I did say this would be a child in need, section 17. I would do direct work with Daniel to get the voice of him, age appropriate drawings. What is it like when mum's away? How does he feel? Work with mum, how she feels isolated by involvement. What's her understanding of his behaviour? Acknowledge her pressures and a demanding career. Validate her feelings for him to do well, and reframe the concerns around Daniel's emotional needs because of what did we put here? Because of class bias. And then risk, what's the short-term and long-term risks? I put short-term emotional breakdown in attachment relationship, school functioning, increased parent frustration. The long-term is chronic emotional neglect, insecure attachment pattern, behavioural difficulties, mental health concerns, and emotional isolation. An intervention plan, managing resistance, and CIN, a child in need plan.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anyone else?
So what the support looks like around mum as well.
Yeah.
And tapping into the private support.
Definitely. That's brilliant. Thank you. Anyone else have any initial responses? So, yeah, Tori.
One of some of the stuff that written down, some other people have said it, but I guess part of working with Daniel is also maybe exploring through direct work and everything, if anything happened to him that may have triggered this behavior, because there's been a high turnover of nannies. It could be something could have happened that would have triggered that, and trying to understand and explore that, and see if, in case there was something even abuse related by nanny, then we'll be able to work through that and get him support he needs.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Yep. Is it Jaquelle? Am I pronouncing?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, most of the issues were being identified by my colleagues, but I will still insist on nannies having a conversation with the nanny, much as we can do direct work with Daniel, but also with the nanny, since she's an adult and spends most of the time with Daniel when mother is out of the country, and to identify what are the triggers for Daniel, why does he have to behave like that, and also at the same time having also direct work with the nanny, but on the mother, having a conversation with the mother, reasons, and if she can adjust her availability, so that Daniel may not reduce on the behaviors. Yeah, but also not forgetting the health and the school collaboration with the health to identify what are the risks, health risks for Daniel, and also, does Daniel behave the same way even at school? Do the behaviors change? Yeah. That's what I would do. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think we've got Jaquelle.
Yeah, hi. Just continuing what some of my colleagues were saying. I'm making the assumption that Daniel understands his mum's job. If he doesn't understand his mum's job, I think somebody kind of needs to explain that to him, because maybe he just doesn't really understand why mum's away, why he's got a new nanny every couple of weeks. Just explain what kind of this looks like for him.
Mm.
I think that's quite important, and this can be done during direct work, or maybe even get mum to kind of explain to him what her job is about. I think that's important as well.
Definitely. Lovely. And I've just, if I is there any other comments for now? We got, is it Jaquelle?
That might be an offhand from before.
Oh, okay. That's fine. So if I just go, let me know if you can you see the original case study again?
Yeah, can I just add that my
Oh,
colleague
yeah.
also had added a comment in the chat. She said, I would meet with parents, explain referral concerns and risks. Her name is Samira. Describe the psychological and emotional effects of this type of neglect. Do direct work with the young person, explore any unmet needs, and do child and family assessment, signpost to behavior intervention for young person or therapy, and find out about other support networks. Speak with nanny. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's brilliant. If I talk through, can you see the slides with the original case study?
Yes.
We can.
Does that come back up? Perfect. So if I talk through kind of what happened with this case and the response. So initially, mum's understanding of what social workers are, just it wasn't there. So the initial thing was actually just explaining to mum what is children's services, and actually that there are means for support and not judgment, and that there is no type of family that social workers work with. And one of the things was explained to her was actually, well, you know, because obviously this was in an independent school setting, clearly there are 2 social workers based in that setting, and so we work with families from all different types of background. One of the things that was missing in the whole process was actually Daniel's voice. So yes, we saw the behaviour at home, but not at school. But mum had never sat down and asked him about his behaviour because she wasn't really there. And the nannies, unfortunately, didn't have the skill set to do that. And so it was having that initial conversation with Daniel and being open and saying, you know, mum's saying that she's struggling with your behaviour at home. This is what's being reported. Tell me a little bit about that. And actually, what we found, what transpired is, you know, mum's working patterns had been like this for a very long time. And so there was that kind of breakdown in parental child relationship where mum wasn't there doing the parenting, and the nanny's expectations of Daniel was very different to what mum's expectations were. And so when mum would come back into the home, actually Daniel was rebelling because all of a sudden he had, you know, high pressure, he has to do X amount of revision, whereas the nannies weren't actually parenting. They were just kind of letting him do what he wanted, eat what he wanted, for an easy life. And he had 4 nannies because actually none of the nannies were DBS checked, which is what we found out after. And so they didn't have the expertise to look after children. The safeguards really weren't there. Mum had just kind of found these people, quite literally. She'd be in the cafe, and, you know, they tended to be quite young people as well, gap year students. So really they were teenagers. And so when it would get too much for them, they would just say, you know, we're not working anymore, and she would quickly find someone else. So that was a problem. And actually the type of caregiver, so it wasn't consistent, but also it just wasn't appropriate, and mum wasn't looking at, you know, what are these risks? Are these people, do they even have a criminal record, just because they're nice in a cafe shop? But also placing those boundaries. So mum wasn't able to kind of understand her son's behavior at all, and she found it difficult to implement any consequences. So it did actually go down the early help route. So it didn't quite meet threshold for child in need, But one of the things that was implemented was she had a family support worker who really helped her with parenting and also praise. So what she was doing a lot of the time was focusing on the poor behaviour, and actually not all of the things that Daniel was doing really, really well. So that was one of the issues. And there was a period where it was looking like it was going to escalate, because mum had decided that she didn't want to care for him anymore. She said, well, maybe he would be better off for a month or two in a children's home. And it was having to explain to her that actually that is only going to further disrupt the attachment. It's not meeting threshold for the child to be taken into care anyway. That's just not going to happen. And realistically, the outcome, if that was to happen, is to have a child who is going to have that relationship severed. So it was a lot about supporting mum in understanding children's behaviour and how to parent, and what her child's actual voice was. And in the end, it did, you know, there was lots of positives in the end, and things have calmed down a lot. And also explaining to mum that yes, this is her job and she has to, you know, travel internationally, but it's also at the expense of her son, which was a really difficult conversation to have when you are telling a parent that essentially, without them changing their hours or work patterns, really this is unlikely to have any long-lasting change. So I think all of the kind of responses that you've had, you know, which I've seen about, you know, engaging with the nanny and helping them understand, absolutely, you know, yes, mum has parental responsibility, but we have someone who is actually acting as the parents, and they need to be brought into the system. And you know, when you are working with wealthy families, if there are nannies, actually it's about asking for consent to bring them into the system, so that the work you're doing with the parents is also reflected with the work you're doing with the nanny, so that they have an understanding. Child's voice, you know, I can see in lots of the responses that's there, and that's very, very important. Also with Daniel at this stage, it was also about implementing counselling for him as well, so that he had a safe space to talk about how he's feeling. So yeah, so lots of good responses, which are in line with kind of with what happened. And I think the last thing as well, and this is more probably from a school's perspective, but I also think from a social worker's perspective, it's also important, was with where the communication from mum was happening outside of hours, you know, in early hours of the morning or late in the evening, actually defining what the boundaries are. Because, you know, as a social worker, you can't be receiving calls at 2 a.m. or, you know, that's going to cause difficulties with actually engaging with parents. They also have a responsibility, regardless of their working patterns. Obviously, you work with them to try and find suitable times and dates, particularly when parents are working long hours. But also they need to understand that they do have a child who needs them to be responsive at a certain hour. And so it was creating those boundaries with this mother in particular about when do we expect to have communication. Well, communication cannot be at 11 p.m. because I'm not going to be working at that time. So yes. So I've got another case study here, so we'll go through this, but what we'll do is, like suggested, actually we will do breakout rooms. So I will need help in the breakout room part, but let me just first go through the case study. So Lucy is 15 years old and she lives at home with her parents and younger twin brothers. She suffers from poor mental health. So she has an eating disorder, so that's diagnosed, and she has a history of self-harm, so self-harm by cutting. So Lucy's psychologist and just say this psychologist is a private psychologist, completed a referral to children's services as they suspect that she has been under the influence of drugs. So recently they've become concerned about her presentation and thinking, actually, this is more than just her mental health. We think there is drugs involved. So what they did, which is a very good thing, is initially they spoke to parents about their concerns and Lucy's presentation and behaviour. The parents said they're not worried. You know, Lucy, yeah, she often stays out with friends, but she's doing better than she was before. So their whole thing is, well, actually, there's been a reduction of self-harm, so they're not concerned, even though sometimes they don't actually know where she's staying. So her whereabouts after attending her independent school are largely unknown. So, yep, she attends school, let's say from 8:25 a.m. till 4 p.m. But after that, no one knows where she is. She comes home at, you know, whatever time she likes, but her school attendance is still very good. And that's what the parents are more concerned about. So they don't believe that she's using drugs. Though mother did joke, you know, well, everyone at that age dabbles in cocaine anyway. So that's mum's initial response. They did say that they do allow her to vape and drink alcohol at home because it's easier. So they think, you know, well, by having her do it at home, that's absolutely fine. At least, you know, she's not outside on the streets. They also report that they don't actually know all the friends she stays with. So all of her friends, it's not like they're from the same independent school, they're not neighbours, but they do trust her judgment. As far as they're concerned, she's 15 years old, you know, they trust her. So, but also she has a debit card, which parents top up. They top up with £500 per month. So that is her monthly allowance. But they are very against checking any transactions because as far as they're concerned, this would betray the trust that they've built up with Lucy. As they've said before, they trust her judgment, and so they do not want to look at her bank account. You know, they're happy with the £500 a month. They don't think it's too much. They don't think it's too little, and they would be very against checking anything that Lucy's doing with that money. So once again, take a photo of this. Please do take a photo of the reflective questions again, because it's going to be the same question, you know, thinking about what type of neglect, what are the risks, whether it's immediate, long term, how does affluence or the cultural expectations, particularly given, you know, what we've spoken about before about what affluent neglect is, how does that actually influence what the parents think is happening? What does meaningful listening to the child look like in this context? You know, where is the child's voice? What kind of support or interventions do you think could bring about lasting change? What biases might you hold, or, you know, the professional network even hold when working with affluent families? How do you think you could coordinate with agencies to ensure this child's well-being? As you can see before, that young person is working with a private psychologist. So rather than the Mentimeter, let's do breakout rooms. So this is when perfect. So who wants to feed back what their group discussed? Okay, and what
Your voice is too cannot hear you clearly. Please increase your volume. Thank you.
I think Clarice was having problem with your volume before, right, Clarice? So you might not be.
It might be because I've got a cold.
Oh, it's not the volume, it's your voice.
Yeah, it's just not projecting very well, maybe. You might need to turn me up on yours.
Okay, so if people can turn the volume up, please do.
Yeah, so we said emotional and supervisionary neglect.
And then we also said that this might be something that was generational. So we think that parents took drugs in front of her, and their parents took drugs in front of them. So it's kind of a thing where it's okay, it's normalized. So it's just a continuing thing. And so maybe they don't understand the fact that, drugs isn't a normal thing that you guys should be doing. So we kind of went with, we would educate the parents on the fact that this is what your child is doing and this is how it can affect them long term. And then when we're doing direct work with the child, it wouldn't be an educational thing. It'd be a thing of, oh, why are you taking this drug? Does it help you do something? What does it do for you? And then we also said that get the parents to understand the child's friends so they kind of know where their child is and what their child's doing if their child's not at home. Yeah.
Brilliant. Anyone else want to feedback?
Yes, we also felt like there was emotional neglect there, and also some parental responsibility was being neglected there. But we did also say that it was very important to speak to the child, because in the referral and everything, there's not a lot of the child's voice that came out. So it's about finding out her thought process, what's going on with her. It looks like a family where things are swept on the carpet. They don't talk about emotional issues, and she's struggling with a lot of issues that she needs to talk about. And yeah, the fact that she has a psychologist working with her means that she does have a lot of things she needs to get off her chest, and maybe creating that safe area where her voice needs to be heard. And then we can then go from there. Like I also said, directly asking her what drugs she takes, how she gets it, and asking about her friends. And also in the assessment, maybe try and speak to those friends as well.
Great, thank you. I think we had Benjamin who put up his hand at some point. Maybe not.
Yes. In our group, we also came up with the idea of putting restrictions on the card. So how much cash can you take out a day? How much can you spend on it a day? Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I can see Clarice has put risk of grooming and exploitation in there as well. Yeah. Then Tori.
Well, Clarice just said what I wanted to say. I was going to say, Lucy, because the parents do not know where a 15-year-old is hanging out and who they are hanging out with. That is a big red flag, because they don't want to know. It's like they don't care. So them not knowing puts Lucy at risk of exploitation, because she's a rich kid. So we don't know if she's hanging out with other rich kids or people from who are not very well off and are actually using her. She's also at risk of even sexual abuse. So 15-year-old out there at weird times of the day, which is obviously a very big risk. We also spoke about the lack of boundaries within the parents, to be able to draw clear lines, and them having this attitude of wanting to trust, which stems a lot. I could be stereotyping, but it stems a lot from people from that social class where they believe a child needs to be independent, they do their own thing. We don't want to ruin their trust. But then sometimes as parents, there has to be a clear line between, is this actually being trustful, or is it me putting safety measures in place for my children? And then also I would also point out that even though it's all about Lucy, as a social worker on the case, I would also look at the twins. What are they witnessing? Because again, they could also have adverse childhood experiences because of this. If there are drugs in the house and the parents are okay with it, how at risk are they, the twins? It doesn't state the age, but what are they seeing and what are they learning that could put them at very high risk of harm?
Yeah. Perfect, thank you. And Joelle?
Yes, thank you. We also talked about who are the other professionals could be involved. We talked about the school, wanting to know Lucy's school attendance. We talked about how the psychology person, how Lucy is coping with her sessions, health, what other implications, health conditions, concerns would be there, and also we would need also to have a direct work with the parent. Reasons why does she give that money to the child, and the accountability, much as she doesn't want to disclose to break the trust, but would know how she uses the money. Maybe she misuses the money with drugs or exploitation or other things. And yes, we appreciated that it is a neglect case and also drug misuse.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to share the slides again. Hopefully I'm going to do this right. So yeah, if I talk through kind of what I did, which is very, very much like what you've all said as well. I think it was about helping the parents understand that actually, particularly around the money, the £500 a month, that actually monitoring transactions isn't about betraying the child's trust. It's about their parental responsibility, and part of that responsibility is ensuring that their child is spending money on things which are appropriate and not concerning. So it was changing that kind of thought process. And in terms of, I guess, tapping into the expertise which are already there, one of the things is working with that psychologist. So where they have raised concerns about influence of drugs, and the parents are reporting, well, actually, you know, Lucy's doing much better now, so let's not even look into that. Actually tapping into that psychologist's expertise in helping the parents understand, you know, what is the impact of cocaine, what is the impact on the child's mental health, what is the impact on the physical health, so that that kind of norm of, well, you know, this is okay because, you know, all kids of that age do it, I did it, you know, grandparents and whatnot did cocaine. Actually, what is the impact, which they didn't quite understand what that was. And in terms of the friends, you're right, the Lucy's voice is completely missing within the referral. And, you know, is she understanding why the psychologist is concerned? What is her understanding of her parents? What does her day-to-day look like? And also, actually, where is she going after school? And just having that general conversation to see, okay, if it takes you, I don't know, half an hour to get home, why on earth are you not home until 10 p.m. in the evening? What is it, you know, what's happening during those missing periods? And with this particular case, it transpired that, you know, yes, she was taking cocaine and ketamine, and one of the things that the young person told me was, oh, well, it's Calvin inclining, and I'd never heard of Calvin inclining before, but that's when you mix cocaine and ketamine. And for her and her friends, who transpired they were all, you know, part of the kind of affluent group anyway, that was a kind of norm for them, is that you do mix cocaine and ketamine, and that's what you do on, you know, it was kind of social night out. And it was explaining to her about the risks of those drugs, the impact on them, and then also where are they getting those drugs? Because yes, the social group may all, you know, attend, you know, the same sort of schools, or maybe not be necessarily exploited themselves, but actually just the affiliation with other people, letting them know the risk of that. Okay, so what happens if you find yourself in debt, or if you are at a party and you are under the influence, what does that look like? You know, you are at risk of being exploited, you are at risk of sexual assault because, you know, you are under the influence, and explaining the risks. So I think tapping into the support system that's already there, so the psychologist, in understanding the physical side and also the mental health side, as well as working with the parents to understand that actually their child is still a child, and kind of looking at that actual adultification that sometimes exists within affluent families, where a child reaches a certain age and they think that, you know, well, they're independent now and they're able to handle all these money and they're able to do all of this. Well, you know, you wouldn't tell someone to get into a car and just drive it without any lessons, and that's kind of the same that goes for teenagers in these experiences. So yes. So I guess in conclusion.
Sorry, Jaquelle,
oh, yeah.
We have a question from Titi, or like a hand.
Yeah.
Titi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question about these affluent families.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the first case study, you see that lack of parental supervision. You see the absence of the mother in the family, which could have been one of the triggers of Daniel's misbehavior. So the second, I'm sorry because I have cough. I'm so sorry.
That's right.
Was the second case study? I'm just looking at it critically. I think Lucy, from even before her birth to the family, I think that family has been known with drug misuse, everything. I see a very huge neglect for that child. So there's no parental supervision. There's no check on her, because I could remember when my daughter was at that age, everything, I have a diary what she does. Does it make sense? And seeing their daughter being on the influence of drug and alcohol, giving her £500 every month is uncalled for. It doesn't sound reasonable. And there's no check how she spends the money. Like when my daughter was in the university, she does what they call spreadsheets. Any money sent to her, she must bring the spreadsheet how she spent it. Does it make sense? It's part of, trying to mold the child and know what she does every time. There's a lot of exposure of sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation, grooming, because at a point they don't know. When she finishes her independent school, she's unknown. Nobody knows her whereabouts. So I think the neglect is so badly in that family. I think the family is dysfunction. Let me ask one question again. Does it mean that affluent family don't know how to discipline their children?
I mean, I guess that's a subjective question, really. I think in terms of looking at and I'm going to generalize here because, not all affluent families have affluent neglect. So I think that's really important to know. And these are, just two cases which aren't unusual and very much I come across.
I'll mute myself because of cough, please.
No, that's fine. I think it's about the difference of the cultural understanding of what a parental role looks like amongst affluent families. So even if you look at, so let's just use the drug use, for example, the cocaine. I mean, even if when you turn on the TV and you look at politicians, there's always some sort of scandal that comes out when they were at Cambridge or Oxford, where there's initiations in cocaine and other types of drugs. So it is quite normalized in that kind of world. So you and I are going, well, cocaine's a class A, but for some, not saying all, but for some affluent kind of communities, actually cocaine is on par with maybe a 15-year-old trying alcohol for the first time, because they have that money to get cocaine in the first place. Cocaine is less addictive than crack, so it's not seen as on the same level, and the cultural norm is kind of there for young people to do cocaine. And like I said, when you do look at those in, you know, politics, and you look at actually what's going on now and all these scandals of all these parties that are going on, actually that is quite normalized. And with the £500 a month for you and I, that's like, oh my gosh, that's extortionate. But if you are someone who is earning, and let's say you've got two parents, and they are earning each, the income's coming in at 20k per a month, and that's what they have. For them, £500 a month to give to their child is not a lot. You know, they're seeing it as, well, you know, they're going to take Ubers, their clothing is likely going to cost more than you and I, the shops that they're going to, you know, the food, the restaurants that they're going to are going to be Michelin star restaurants. So it's not kind of McDonald's or Nando's and those sorts of treats. Actually, their food bills are going to cost a lot more. So for you and I, £500 is like, what does a 15-year-old need that amount of money? But for a family who has more of an income, it's just not going to be seen as the same. And there is that expectation that, you know, once they hit a certain age, actually there is that kind of norm. And like I said, I'm generalizing a lot here, of when you hit a certain age, you should know what you want to do. You know, by the age of, I know from working in an independent school, the year 7s coming in are already telling me they want to go to Oxford and Cambridge, and are looking at what A levels they're going to be studying, and they're 11 years old. That pressure's already there. So by the time they are 15, they, according to their parents and what the norm is, they should have already been decided what they want to do. They will be attending loads of extracurricular activities. So after school, it's not uncommon for them to be doing, you know, rowing or horse riding or whatever they're doing. And they have such a busy schedule that the parents struggle to keep on top of it. And so they do just expect their children to manage their own time. So for you and I and most families, you know, if a child finishes school at 4 p.m, you expect them home at 4:30. But if you have a child who is engaging in, you know, they've got violin lessons, they've got revision, they've got rowing, they've then got netball, they've got this whole timetable, and let's say those parents have 4 children, for them, if they're not coming back at 10, they're just trusting that, oh, they had orchestra or they had a drama rehearsal after school. They're not questioning those things because it's part of their norm. And there is that expectation that 15-year-olds are older than what they are. And things like criminal exploitation or sexual exploitation, they're just not words that affluent families even think of. You know, as far as they're concerned, their children often live in gated communities. Schools are very gated. I know from working in mine, we've got loads of security, and they live in this kind of bubble. So those risks that for us, we're going, you know, wealth doesn't mean that you're protected from exploitation at all, but that's just not even something they would think of at all. And so, yes, it 100% falls under neglect, which is why we're doing this session. But it's not intentional neglect. It's because their cultural norm is allowing these things to happen. I hope that kind of answers that. I've got a few hands up.
One is mine. Sorry, I cannot.
No.
I have so many questions. But anyway, just 2 quick questions. The first one is, because you were saying that sometimes can be the norm. So, and we do tend to think that then when what we are experiencing, all the people around us is experiencing, and that's normal, then to what extent the children that you work with are aware or realize that there might be issues of neglect? That's the first question. And the second one is that you were saying at the beginning that there is a resistance sometimes from parents, that it's just like, not just the denial, but like, I'm not willing to take anything from you because they are used to having that power. Does the same happen? Does this transcend to the children? And is it more difficult also to work with the children or the young people because they are also in a entitled kind of behavior towards you? So that's the two questions. Sorry.
Yeah, I think in regards to the first one, as to whether the children are aware of the neglect, I would say 90% of them are, and I think that's where conflict arises. So in the environment obviously I work in, there are 2 social workers based in the independent school that I work. We do safeguarding training with all of the kids because they're doing peer mentors and work experience and all things like that, and it covers sexual abuse, neglect and so forth. And part of their life skills sessions, they also learn about kind of healthy relationships, but also parenting. And so what we have found is that actually our students are having a better understanding of what their parents should be doing and what the oversight should be, and that is creating conflicts. So we do have kids, attending school counselling, and they're talking about their parents and the fact that their parents aren't emotionally available, or they can't speak to them about certain things. So I think there's a shift amongst probably affluent families, which is partly due to the education that this younger generation are receiving. So yes, I do think they're aware. And what was the second question? Sorry.
Whether it is more difficult to work in partnership, like to do to work with those young people, because the parents' attitudes towards social workers in like, I'm not willing to work with you, whether that also is reflected on young people's behaviors, whether they might be resistant just because they are affluent and they are used to being in a power trip, let's say.
Yeah, yes and no, probably. And that's where the conflict comes in. So just for an example, I did a referral, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, to Children's Services, affluent neglect kind of case. And the response from Children's Services, I mean, initially it was Section 47, and that was fine. But actually they spoke with the parents, and I think they took the parents' view on face value, and there was a massive delay in speaking with the child, even though it was Section 47. So they did the initial contact with the child, but the follow-up was 2 weeks. And the child said to me, well, what's the point of getting social workers involved if they're not listening to what I'm saying? I'm saying that I'm scared at home. That was their exact words. And so that's been a challenge. The challenge is working, I think, externally with Children's Services. I think the kids have a good understanding of definitions, what abuse is, what harm is, and what the duties are of the safeguarding team, let's say. The difficulty is once you do that referral, and understandably, like I said, Children's Services have, a kind of, crisis with resources at the moment. The response isn't necessarily understanding affluent neglect, and so 9 times out of 10 it's just case closure. Like, it's not even meeting to get a child and family assessment. It's literally a phone call to parents, and that's it. And then that's when it becomes difficult with that child, because sometimes something happens again and I say, oh, we're going to do another referral, and by then trust is completely broken down. It's like, well, what's the point in doing this? So yeah, I think a lot needs to be done at the governmental level to support services in their response to affluent neglect. But I wouldn't say the children are more resistant at all, apart from where it probably comes to the partying and the alcohol and the drugs, and that's because obviously they're young and they feel like that's something that is fine, as most young people do, because they don't understand risk. Right, I've got someone else's hand up. Is it Chinarumika? Am I saying your name right?
I think that's Chichi. Chichi, that might be the an old hand as well, right? From before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be.
Probably is. Okay, wonderful. Let me go back to the slides. Yeah, so just questions now. So if anyone has any further questions to ask, then I'm here. Yeah, Tori.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I just want to ask, in a scenario where, you know, you can obviously see that this is relating to, you know, affluence, but you, as a social worker, you're working under management that do not understand that, you know, because like you say, not everyone, because obviously you worked in an independent school and you saw it every day, so it kind of became the norm. But looking at local authorities that have, you know, that have, if I can say, bigger fish to fry in their own words, then how then do you navigate? Because it's not like I'll have to say, okay, now sit down, I'm going to teach you about this, something that you may not be aware of. Because I think it will be a great challenge where if you're in a local authority where it's shredded by bigger issues that stem from poverty, you know, domestic abuse, substance abuse. I mean, there's local authorities that just have that as a main thing, really. So now saying, oh, there's just that one case that has come in, and the people are rich, and these are the concerns, and they can afford a private psychologist. So then, how, as a social worker, a newly qualified social worker, or even as a student, navigate that? Because for you, I feel like it was, I don't want to say easier, but you were in that situation. But from a local authority point of view, you're outside that situation. And to understand that without proper training and education, even for a very good manager, can be very difficult.
Yeah, it is. It's really tricky. And I think it comes back down to evidencing impact as well. So it's looking at, okay, that referral's come in, right, these are the concerns. And yes, on paper, they may not seem, you know, as, especially if you've got two different cases and one, you know, is physical neglect, that is a lot more obvious to kind of identify, but also to see the immediate risk. But it's looking at, okay, what is the impact on that child? And then also working with the services that are already working with that child. So often, I think, you know, as a social worker, you know, your first thing is you call parents to get a better understanding. You know, you've had the referral come in, but not taking what they've said as face value and saying, can I have consent to speak with the child's school? Can I have consent to speak with the child's psychologist? You know, whether it is private or it is within CAMS. Most parents will not deny that consent. Obviously, if it's Section 17, they have a right to do that. But from what I've found in the assessment team, is most parents will say yes. And then it's being, I think, quite to the point with those professionals and saying, okay, what are your concerns and what is the impact on the child? And once you have that, you can then present that back to your line manager and actually say, okay, well, yes, we've got this has come in, but these are the worries that the external network have. So it's all about that evidence, but it's always about working together and having more voices to raise those concerns. Because I think if you just speak to the parents, which often, you know, I admittedly as a social worker have done myself, you know, if something comes through, I just call the parents, get a better understanding, case closure. But actually doing those external checks, which may take a day or two longer, but it's evidence and impact, and then you can challenge your manager as well in that. I hope that answers that.
Yes, thank you.
So there's 5 minutes left. There's time for one more question, probably. Clarice.
Hi. So what is your actual job role in the independent school? Because I'm assuming it doesn't fall under social worker. Is it like pastoral lead or designated safeguarding lead?
Yeah, so it's designated safeguarding lead. So I'm still registered with Social Work England and part of British Association for Social Workers. So I'm still kind of like aligned with my social work body and has to evidence everything. But no, my title is now designated safeguarding lead. So I kind of have, I think I'm in quite a privileged position where obviously I've come from working with local authorities. So I know the structure of how things work, and also the kind of things that are going on and the way social workers view things when assessments come through. But now, yeah, I'm currently just working within the independent setting. So looking strategically at safeguarding, so implementing policies, making sure we're adhering to the law, as well as any kind of more complex cases, doing referrals to them. So whether it's to prevent CAMS or children's services. And yeah, I'm working with the more tricky parents sometimes. so that's the role. But I am also in a quite, like I said, privileged position where in the borough that I'm in, I do have a good relationship with the LADO, and I've brought up affluent neglect with the LADO and the actual local authority there, and they did do all training on affluent neglect, because it was something that I said, I know I'm struggling with, but speaking to my counterparts, getting it through the front door is really, really difficult. So yeah, I'm quite privileged in that aspect.
Because I live in Windsor, so obviously it's quite a affluent area. And we have many independent schools. So
yeah,
the job roles you'd look for rather than.
Yeah, I mean the good thing is more independent schools are employing social workers. So Eton, for example, they have their DSL was the LADO for Windsor. So yeah, so more and more schools, independent sectors are employing social workers, because this is an issue, really, not just affluent neglect, but kind of challenging parents and helping them understand, that wealth doesn't mean that these things get overlooked. Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. On the last slide as well, I've just got resources. Let's just get that up. I think that's there. Perfect. Yeah, just some further reading. Like I said, I would really recommend reading Professor Claudia Bernard's research, because it's really helpful, both to understand, I think, social workers' perspectives of working with affluent neglect, but also it's kind of reassuring, because sometimes when you are working with particularly challenging families who do question, I guess, your authority and knowledge in these things, it can make you question yourself, and actually understanding these are the tactics that some of these parents employ can be quite empowering in remembering that you're the expert in this. So yes.
Thank you so much. It's been like fascinating topic, and we are very privileged to be able to have you with all your experience, exploring all the challenges and dilemmas and interesting cases that you encounter, and also for giving us an opportunity to reflect about it, and to even as parents, well, even thinking about, oh, maybe this is a pathway, like a career or a professional career that I might be pursuing in the future. So that is so thank you so much.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. So enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.